I didn't publish my first book until I was 50. It was a slow process for me, very slow. I had been so little by little, because you have a life, you have kids, you have to earn a living, you have all these things going on. Sadly, I worked on this book for almost 9 years, but it got it out of my head and away so I could start something new. I couldn't go back and fix it. I probably could now, but I don't want to. You know how to do it because you've read so many books, and you write this book and you think it's great. And why isn't it great? Because you've read all these books and you know how to tell a story. But then you start learning that it's not great and why it's not great. When I started to get published, it was just this jump to get better.
Today, I'm excited because we have an incredible guest joining us, award-winning author Shannon Baker. Shannon's lived in some amazing, unique places, like the Nebraska Sandhills, where the cattle basically rule the land. And now she's living in Tucson, soaking up that desert vibe. She's even worked with the Grand Canyon Trust, a group of passionate environmentalists, though they don't usually solve murders. Shannon has written over 17 thrillers, and with more on the way, she has a lot of writing experience. Not only that, but she's also a 2-time winner of Writer of the Year from the Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers. So yeah, she knows her stuff. Her books bring the American West to life in the best possible way. Today, Andrew and I talk with Shannon about her journey as a writer, how nature inspires her stories, and how she became the best-selling author she is today. It's gonna be a lot of fun. So grab a drink, sit back, and let's jump in. Oh, and don't forget to hit the like button, drop a comment, and subscribe if you want more interviews like this. Let's get into it. Thank you so much to best-selling author Shannon Baker for joining us this morning. We are so excited to have you, Shannon.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I want to start with these incredible places that you've lived in. I mean, you've lived in the Nebraska Sandhills, and right now I know you're living in Tucson, Arizona. How have these unique settings shaped you, both as a person and as a writer?
Well, it's funny you should ask. The first time I drove through the Nebraska Sandhills, I was 21. I was going across the state to a wedding, and I drove through the Nebraska Sandhills in August, probably during a drought, whatever. And I drove through and I thought, I would never live here. This is just the end of the universe. It was just hill after hill of brown, dry grass, no trees. It was really awful. Then I convinced myself when I met my husband, who I fell madly in love with, which is another cautionary tale, but we'll go through that later. And I thought, I can live out there. So I married this guy, and I moved to this ranch that was 5 miles as the crow flies to the nearest ranch. And it was 20 miles into town, which was a half hour, to a town that had a little bitty grocery store. And I was sitting on my waterbed. This is how long ago it was, my waterbed. And I was bawling. I'd been married for a month. And I thought, I got to get out of this. I can't live here. This is just awful. And then I thought, well, I would really be a flake if I divorced after 1 month. So I decided I needed to learn to love the Sandhills. And so I did. And that's what I write about now. I mean, it's a deep, deep love that I felt for the Sandhills, and it's a love that Kate feels for the Sandhills. But it's definitely an acquired taste.
And kind of with that acquired taste, you visit places that you also include in your books on research trips. How do you find that, like, being in those settings, such as the Sandhills or even a rodeo, how do you find that being there changes how you write about them?
I don't necessarily go to places for research, although I did last winter. I usually, I'll travel to someplace. Don't tell the IRS this, but I'll travel someplace and then think, ooh, I can use this in a book. This time I do, because I'm taking a trip to Costa Rica in January, and I've decided already that Kate has to go to Costa Rica. And so I'm going to write that one off, but I'm planning to begin with.
It's a great excuse for an author to take a vacation.
Yeah, I've got to figure out how to get her scuba diving. I keep mentioning that she wants to go scuba diving, but I haven't figured out how I can get Kate into the water yet. But with last winter, we went to the stock show in Colorado, in Denver, the National Finals Rodeo Stock Show, whatever. It has a name. But it goes like 2 weeks in Denver, and I had been there a million years ago when I lived on the ranch in Nebraska. So I dragged my good husband. I dragged him to the stock show, and he used to raise quarter horses. in Colorado. And so he was familiar. He knew people. People were coming up to him and saying, "Hi, how are you?" That was a lot of fun. He was an insider on that, which I had no idea.
Shannon, when you do those technically research trips or not, like, do you write when you're on those trips or not?
It depends. The trip in Costa Rica is actually with two other writers. And so we're going to write while we're there. It's a writer's retreat.
Yeah. What does like your typical writing day look like then?
Well, when I go with these writers, we write in the morning. And so we'll do our whatever, we get up and we write. And then when everybody has their word count in or whatever they were doing for that day, then we'll go out and play. We've done this several times. We went up to Northern California last year up by Fort Bragg, which is showing up in a couple of books now too. So we write in the mornings and then go play in the afternoon.
How many years have you been writing now?
Oh my God. So it was a subversive thing I started when I graduated from college. You know, I was 22 when I started, 23.
5 years then? Or?
Yeah. I didn't publish my first book until I was 50. So it was a slow process for me, very slow.
When you were 50 and when you first published, like what sparked that decision?
Actually, I had been so little by little, because, you have a life, you have kids, you have to earn a living, you have all these things going on. But I wrote pretty consistently all the way through, but not enough to really get some traction. And sadly, I worked on this book for almost 9 years. I still love the premise of this book, but I didn't have the skill. I didn't have the craft. I didn't have anything. And finally, I got really frustrated with it. And I stuck it. I said to my good husband, I'm done with this book. I'm going to move on. And he said, well, what are you going to do with it? Why don't you just send it to one of these places? So I did. I sent it to what I like to call a nano press. I don't know. This was in 2010. So they did format it for me and helped me got a cover. They did some editing on it and put it out there. And this was before a lot of ebooks came out. I mean, it was just starting. The book went nowhere. It was not a good book, but it got it out of my head and away so I could start something new. At that point, I couldn't go back and fix it. I probably could now, but I don't want to. It's too much time. So yeah, I had to get that away from me before I could then start with my new skills and build something from that. And that one did get picked up.
Do you kind of find that you still feel that way, that you need to get away from a story before you can find a new one? Or are you able to work on multiple things at once?
No, I am a one-trick pony. I mean, it comes at me one at a time. I'm so jealous of Lindy Walker when she says, oh, I've got so many ideas I don't know what to do with. It's like, please, you're just a few of them coming my way. But no, I pretty much get one idea at a time. At this point, I do have 3 manuscripts that are done that are not Kate Fox books, but I'm one at a time. As Winnie the Pooh says, I'm a bear of very little brain.
So you've mentioned that you are a bear of one brilliant brain from your Kate Fox series.
Thank you.
Other than that challenge, what is some of the other challenges that you faced as a writer? Kind of finding an agent, generating your first sales, writer's block?
Yes, all of it. Yeah. Finding an agent was really tough. And in fact, I like to say my first actual publishing foray was with Midnight Ink., which is an imprint of Llewellyn. It's no longer there. So it's like a mid-sized press. I was able to publish with them because I met the publisher. I met the acquiring editor at a conference. And I didn't have an agent, and they didn't require agents at the time. So I didn't have an agent. But after that series, I was able to get an agent. But that was so challenging to get an agent. It probably harder than getting published, I think, was getting an agent.
So that is what I was going to ask, as you think about your journey in the beginning, especially, what is the hardest part?
Actually, the hardest part was learning how to write. I think Ira Glass talks about this. You start off thinking that you know how to do it, because you've read so many books, and you write this book and you think it's great. And why isn't it great? Because you've read all these books and you know how to tell a story. But then you start learning that it's not great and why it's not great. Me, anyway, I'm embarrassed by those first efforts that I took to a conference thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to get published. This is so great. People are going to go, where have you been? So let me publish this book. So I think the hardest thing is gaining that humility, and learning the craft is difficult and time consuming.
Do you feel like you have to write to be able to learn the craft? I've written 9 books, and in the beginning, just like you say, like my first ones, I'm like embarrassed by, and then I slowly kind of got the hang of it. I hear about a lot of, especially like from the big publishers, people that have one book, it's their first book, and then they write one book per year. And these very successful authors that have written like 3 books, you can get so many more reps by going, like allowing yourself to publish something that maybe isn't perfect and publishing more frequently. Writing more books helped you become a lot better? Or do you think it was just the amount of time that you spent writing?
Definitely. You have to practice. It's like anything else. You don't get to be a gymnast unless you're on that beam falling off all the time. I think the big jump in my craft was when I actually started publishing with a publisher, because they would come back and say, no, rewrite this, or this isn't going to work, or here's a suggestion. Or I think getting into the system just jumpstarts you. It's like my daughter playing volleyball when she was in high school. She and another girl were neck and neck. They could play at the same level, but the other girl's aunt was the coach. And so the other girl got to play. And as she played more, her skill just increased that much further to where she and my daughter were on completely different levels. So that's how I think when I started to get published, it was just this jump to get better.
Sure. Makes total sense.
As you've gotten better, your books have a large fan base. And as a reader, I know both of you are authors, but as a reader, I always love to hear the stories of authors being able to interact with other readers. Do you have a favorite story about a fan or an unexpected connection from your books that you've made?
Yeah, I have a couple. So I was coming back from VoucherCon a couple years ago, and I was flying through the Denver airport. I am not a people person. So when I fly, I have my book. I have a force field around me. I have a really, really good bitchy resting face. I was sitting, having a glass of wine and eating, and I'm reading my book. And this woman next to me she was chattering away with this other woman. They were having some kind of conversation I was completely ignoring. And the woman got up and left. And so this other woman who was sitting next to me just turns around and starts talking to me. And I'm thinking, oh, great. And I'm not mean. I'm just, And it turned out she was from Omaha. And I mentioned I was the band at VoucherCon. And I mentioned Kent Kruger. And she was so excited. And then we started talking. And a couple months ago, I got a text from this woman, or an email that said, I met you at the Denver airport and I started reading your books and I loved them. And that was a good lesson to me, just being nicer to people.
Have you ever come across your books in the wild unexpectedly?
No. I wish I would.
We're working on it. We're trying hard. Thanks a lot, Catherine.
Yes. Sorry, I thought it bad.
Helped me on that one. I had lunch with a longtime friend of mine just the other day, and she had been on a trip. She likes to listen to books on trips. Plus, I have the absolute best narrator on the planet for my books. She is so good, so good. And my friend said, yeah, she'd just been on this trip, and she said, I was in a foreign country, couldn't watch TV, couldn't do anything. So she said, I was listening to your books, and she said, they get better every book. I was blown away because I keep thinking every time I turn one in, oh, that's going to be the one that they're going to go, no, I don't like it anymore. With each book, they get harder because you've used all the stuff, and now you got to dig a little deeper to get more stuff. So I'm always afraid that I've run out. And so I was really happy when she said, no, they're getting better.
You need to go on more research trips.
Yes. From your lips to God's ears, yeah.
As you were mentioning, I mean, every book gets better and better and better. And that's what reviewers say every time when you read reviews of your books. And the Kate Fox series has garnered 20,000 reviews so far. But what's your philosophy on reviews? Do you read them after a book is published?
The healthy thing would be to say no, I don't read them. But, I am not that healthy. I do read them, not all of them, depending on my mood. I react in various ways. Mm-hmm. So I've never responded to anybody because everybody gets their own opinion. I've been through enough critique groups that I know everybody gets whatever. I read them, and if enough people make the same comment, I think it's worth addressing. For instance, a lot of comments on the first book, Stripped Bare in the series. that there's too many characters and they can't keep them straight. My first reaction is, not my first reaction, depending on my mood. If I'm in a really foul mood, I might say, well, I'm sorry you're so, you aren't smart enough to follow, 5 characters in your head, which is not right, because I get confused too when I read books. I try now to make it more clear. I don't necessarily cut back on the characters, but I try to give each character more something distinct. Right now, I'm writing, and it's really playing into play because I'm writing a book that has 8 suspects. They're all new characters in this book, and so
that's a lot to keep track of.
It is. What I'm doing is an homage to Agatha Christie.
Yeah,
and it's that's not taking on. She had 12. I cut it back to 8.
Kind of with that in mind, I know that you just talked about kind of building upon what reviewers are saying sometimes, kind of picking and choose based off your own thoughts. But what advice would you give to new authors about building their review base?
That is really difficult, and it is a skill I don't have, and thankfully my publisher does. So when I started with SRP, I think I had like 30 reviews was on my best book. And now I think I looked this morning. Oh, by the way, Strip Bear is doing well today. I think there were like 7,000 reviews on that. And that is not me. I think the synergy more than anything from my publisher who uses the different other authors together. And I don't know, it's magic as far as I know.
What we find is it is directly correlated to sales. So if you're selling a lot of books, there's a certain percentage. And I think certain channels, there might be a higher percentage of reviews than others. And a lot of that has to do with like, if people are reading on the Kindle app, well, Amazon has structured it so that you get a pop-up to leave a review right as you finish. So that's going to increase the percentage chance that people would leave a review more so than if they had a print book. Now they have to like take that extra effort and go log in and find it and do that, So the secret for us is sell a lot of books. And then there are other things that we can do from a marketing perspective where we're going to encourage your existing fan base to leave a review, after you have a launch or something like that. But really, it's just write a great book and then sell a lot of them. That's our secret sauce. And I think the majority of that is like, if you're going to make chicken soup, you got to have chickens, so you got to have a really good book in the first place. And that was a Nebraska football quote, the chicken soup thing. That was,
was it? Okay.
The national championship winning Nebraska football coach said that a long time ago about, okay, enough nerdness.
I love that though. You can always throw in a Go Big Red reference with me.
Yeah. Okay, so as someone who has built what I would consider a very successful writing career, what advice do you have for aspiring authors?
The first thing is to learn, don't be too quick to say you're done. It's a business. If you want to be good, it's a business and you have to treat it like a business. A doctor doesn't go in to surgery unless she has had all those years of training. So you have to know what you're doing and practice that. So that would be my first thing, is to learn how to write. The second advice I would have is don't be be nice to people.
We just got the PG-13 rating, Catherine. Just so
I go to a lot of conferences and you can network and you meet a lot of people, and that's a good thing to do. But, be nice. It's a small industry. Writers, especially in the mystery field, are the most generous, just giving people almost in every aspect of the mystery world. It has this rising tide lifts all boats. So there's so much support and so much just giving in the mystery world. So if you can tap into that and give as well as receive, it's a great community.
I would love to kind of shift gears and start talking about your books themselves and their stories that are within them. First and foremost, your books often feature rural landscapes and strong, resilient women like Kate Fox, and it seems like yourself as well. They're so important to you. How do they reflect your own experience?
When I went out to the Sandhills, I'm an outdoorsy person, right? But I'm outdoorsy like, let's go skiing, let's go hiking, not let's go out and put on, 18 layers of coveralls and stick our arm up the back end of a cow. That. So I had to learn a lot of that. I can't build a fence. I can't do a lot of those outdoors things that Kate can do. I wish I was more courageous. I wish I was brave. I wish I could do the things. So anytime I write in a book, a confrontation, like if Kate is standing up and, getting in somebody's face, just know that that's not me. That is pure fantasy. That's like, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do this because I'm going to go back and don't talk to me kind of thing. I think Kate gives me courage because I can write courage into her. And I like that. As far as the settings go, man, if there's a day I don't get outside, I'm cranky. That's just part of my makeup. And so most of my characters also have that in them.
And your characters themselves have created personal connections with readers as they have created personal connections with you, obviously, as you've written them. Are there any particular friends or people you have encountered that have inspired or influenced the characters? I mean, as much as you're willing to tell us, I guess. Sometimes.
I make no bones about this because I don't think they read the books, but if they do, I don't really care. I'm in the Sandhills, been married forever. I'm raising 2 kids. And after 15 years of marriage in a county of 1,000 people in a town of 300, I find out my husband's been having an affair for 5 years. Not that I'm gullible and naive, but okay, I was pretty much the last to know. So a lot of that shows up in my books, in the Kate books, because her husband she had a similar experience. His bimbo is Roxy, who I absolutely love Roxy. She's so much fun to write. But Roxy is an amalgamation of 2 different people in the Sandhills. And one of them is the woman that, whatever, hit my husband's bimbo. And so she's a combination of these 2 women that I actually know. And some of her dialogue is pulled straight from their voices, it's the most bizarre dialogue ever. And I chortle when I write it. It's like, so yeah, they always say revenge is best served cold, but I think writing is the best revenge. It's just so sweet.
Best served between pages, I suppose.
Yeah.
I'm a dog lover, and I feel like if we don't mention your dog, who we met very briefly in the interview, I don't feel like we've done justice. Your dog, Jezebel, is featured in a lot of your social media for those people who follow you. Has she ever inspired a quirky or memorable moment in your stories?
She's asleep right here, and I'm glad you can't smell the farts that are coming out of her. Because she's old now, she's 9. She hasn't necessarily, but, as a dog lover, we all have dogs, whatever. When I worked at the Grand Canyon Trust, we managed the north rim of the Grand Canyon is ranch land. If you're from the Sandhills, it's not, but they have cattle up there, and we had a ranch manager, and he had this standard poodle that was just ridiculous. I mean, it's a ridiculous cow dog. Would bring Poupon in, and was ungroomed, and Poupon was disdainful of everybody and everything, and he would just walk around like this. So when Kate acquires a dog, she acquired Poupon. I take him name and all, so he's inspired by the real Poupon. So
immortalized with Kate next to him.
Yeah. Because, they're characters, the 2 bachelor brothers, one of the brothers is terrified of Poupon. He shows up everywhere. He's just there. A silly little dog. And they always say, well, he's not much of a cow dog. And Kate always says, well, I don't have cows. So
you mentioned, I think just right there, you mentioned about 3 characters from your books just in the last minute. And you mentioned earlier how reviewers always say that there's too many characters in Stripped Bare. How do you keep it straight when you're writing? I imagine like a family tree on your wall in your writing room.
You have like a series Bible or story Bible. I know some authors have that.
I really regret that I don't have a series Bible. I have notes now. The first 2 books were published by Macmillan, and they have an editorial system. They bring you back your style sheets, and they have all the characters. It's great for 2 books, but then I didn't carry it through. When I started writing Kate Fox, I wanted it to be a long series, so I gave her 8 brothers and sisters. She's one of 9 kids. I thought, well, each book could take care of one. It really is like a family. You get to know them all. And although there are cousins I wish I kept track of, because, if I go back and that's a cousin of her father, and I totally forgot. I shouldn't say this, but in the very first book, her younger brother has a baby with another woman, and it's a redheaded baby named Mason. I'm now on book 11. This kid has never shown up again, ever. I think in one book, I finally thought I need to address it. And I said, his baby mama moved away and took the baby away. But, it's the Kate Fox, it's the Fox clan. They're going to love that kid and want it back. And I don't know where it is right now.
That's funny.
Can you give us a sneak peek out to what you're working on next? Maybe one of those 3 manuscripts that's sitting there.
I'm jumping genres a little bit. And so I'm jumping into, I don't even know what to call it, like book club fiction or something, which is really a difficult genre to break into. So I have a draft written. It's not ready. But, I just negotiated with my publisher for a little extra time between Kate Fox books. So maybe.
Can you describe that a little more? What is book club fiction?
I would call it maybe women's fiction, except it's not romance.
Uh-huh.
There's not much romance. It's very character driven. What my husband would call kitchen scenes. So nothing's happening. But, lots happening underneath.
Do you want to throw in any more teasers other than that? What the plot is about? Or
I'm calling it Steel Magnolias meets Anxious People.
There we go.
So,
and if people want to hear more about that Steel Magnolias meets Anxious People, where is the best place for them to find you?
My website, they can hit an email through my website, and that's shannon-baker.com.
Amazing. And we'll link those all in the description below. Well, thank you so much, Shannon, for joining us. We're so excited to have you.
This has been great. The only thing that would make it better if it was in the afternoon and we had wine.
You're so right. Thank you so much, and we'll see everybody next time.
Okay. All right. See ya.